Some people say that now is the best time in history to be living. What is your opinion about this? What other time in history would be interesting to live in? This question is certainly a difficult one, and what would make it exceptionally difficult for most people is the mention of history here. Because the first instinct usually is, I don't know anything about history. Well, you don't need to know anything about history, at least not the kind of history that is taught in schools. If you do know about it, great. But we'll write on the assumption that you don't know much about history. So what do? Well, you don't panic and you follow the steps that we always do when writing an essay. First, read and understand the question. The opinion expressed is that the time today that we are living in is the best time ever. What is your opinion about this? This is just another way of saying, do you agree with this opinion or do you not agree with it? The second question is, what other time in history would be interesting to live in? So it doesn't matter whether you agree with the given statement or disagree with it. You need to mention another time from the past which according to you would be interesting. Once I understand the question, I'm usually able to figure out what the basic format of my essay would be. The beginning is always the introductory paragraph, the introduction. The ending is the conclusion. In between are the body paragraphs which we need to figure out. So in this case, after the introduction, I answer the first question. If I'm saying that yes, the present time is the best time ever, I could write just the good stuff such as technological advancements, or I could write the positives as well as negatives, but write more positives than negatives, and then again agree with the given viewpoint. I can also choose to disagree with the opinion, write only negatives of the present times, or write both negatives and positives, but more negatives than positives, and then say, no, I don't agree with the given opinion. Either way, after answering the first question in the second paragraph, in the third paragraph, I would answer the second question. This question about which other time would be interesting is where the history part really comes in. And in the end will be the conclusion which would summarize the essay and once again clearly mention my opinion about whether the present time is the best one or not. Let's now start planning the essay. Is the time we are living in the best time in history to be living? I'll be listing out both positives and negatives, but as I've mentioned before, you can choose to write only positives or only negatives too. Although I always recommend that you write both sides. Use some conjunctions such as although to convey that although they are positives, the negatives are more or vice versa. So let's start listing out the positives of the time that we are living in. The first thing I think about is the technological advancements that we have. Thanks to these technological advancements, every aspect of our life has evolved. Another positive I'm immediately thinking of is entertainment. Everything from TV shows to movies to music to video games is available at the click of a button. I'm old enough to remember a time when there was no internet, no Netflix. You watched what was there on TV when it was on TV. Now you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want. And back then, music was restricted to cassettes and CDs. Now I carry my music with me on my phone. Another positive is having 24/7 access to information. Internet, computers, smartphones. So all of these points that I'm writing are connected to technological advancements only. Another positive is about the varied modes of communication that we have today. Video calls, video conferencing, real-time online meetings, work from home. Then there are many comforts of life, the many material comforts that we have, from air conditioners to motor vehicles to affordable air travel. Another positive is the medical advancements of today. Life expectancies are longer than ever before. And the last point that I can think of is that discrimination is in decline. Racism, sexism, everything is being talked about, because of which at least there is some improvement. These problems still exist, but I feel they are reducing with time. Do note that most of the things that I've mentioned were either developed in the last 2-3 decades or at least they became popular and more easily accessible in the last 2-3 decades. However, let's list out some negatives as well. One huge negative of the present time is the environmental issues that we are facing. climate change, pollution, etc. And another negative I can say is that in the past, life was simpler. So today we could say that consumerism and materialism have taken over, relationships have taken a back seat, everybody has become too self-obsessed because of all the dependence on technology. Now we come to the tricky part of the question. What time in history would be interesting according to you? The easiest way that I can think of to answer this question without any knowledge of history is to think of some historical figure, some personality from the past that I'm fascinated by, or I could just mention some product, some discovery, some invention from the past, and just say that I would have wanted to be around at that time. An example is, as a movie buff, I've always been intrigued by the diverse range of iconic movies that came out in the 1970s, such as The Godfather, Star Wars, and Jaws. Having watched and enjoyed these movies, I do feel that it would have been great to have experienced them when they were first released. So I feel that is a time period which was delightfully fascinating. Another option I can think of when answering this question is to just focus on one single person from the past. This would again depend on your personal interests. But here are a few examples. As someone who is into sports, both as a spectator and as a player, I wish I had met the legendary boxer Muhammad Ali. I cannot even begin to imagine how impressive it would have been to watch one of his fights live. Muhammad Ali is a historical figure whom I wish I could meet, not just for his professional accomplishments, but also for his strong moral compass and principles. Therefore, I think when Muhammad Ali walked the earth was a fascinating time. In this writing, I have consciously not mentioned the time when Muhammad Ali was around, on the assumption that while writing such an essay during the IELTS tests, I may not know about the exact years when he was around. So if I did know, I could have written this as, I think when Muhammad Ali walked the earth, especially when he was at the peak of his career in the 1960s and 1970s, was a fascinating time. Some other suggestions? Jane Austen and the time that she lived in, or I could say that the time that she wrote about in her novels. Einstein, if you're into science. Similarly, I could write about Leonardo da Vinci, who was both a scientist and an artist, or I could write about a period with mention of some historical event. For example, the independence of a country. If I'm fascinated by architecture or just history in general, I could write that I think that the time when the pyramids were built was an interesting period. If I'm into science, I could also write that I would want to be around to meet Newton. Or I could write about a king who fascinates me. I could say the reign of a particular king was great. And I could even write about a time when a certain religion started. And lastly, maybe I could write that I think my grandparents' time was the best ever. That my grandfather has talked to me at length about how great things were when he was growing up, that back then they had some technological advancements and many material comforts, but life was simpler, life was more peaceful, so that is the time I would have wanted to live in. None of these ideas require any great knowledge of history. All these ideas hinge on your interests. All of us know some things about history. We may not know the dates or the exact chronology of events. We may just vaguely know what had happened, but that is enough for this essay. It matters how you explain your reasons rather than how many facts you know about that time. Having thought of all these points, on to writing the essay. I'll be writing 2 essays in response to this question. In the first one, I'll agree with the given viewpoint that the present time is the best time, and in the second one, I'll disagree with it. Also in both, I'll answer the second question differently. However, the beginning of the essay is the same in both. I'm just paraphrasing the question. In the essay question, the statement is in active voice. I'm changing it to passive voice. I'm using a couple of synonyms and I'm using the phrase bar none, which means with no exceptions. So I'll start my essay with, the present time being the best time bar none is an opinion held by some. And then I'll just go on to say that this is something on which people can have different opinions. I'm choosing not to give my opinion here. I'm choosing not to write whether I agree or disagree here. However, if you want, you can do that. So what I'm writing is, however, it is certainly a rather subjective statement and open to different perspectives. In the first sample essay, I will just write the positives one after the other. So I'll start the second paragraph with the mention of technological advancements, and then I will list out these advancements. I'll start with technological advancements of the past couple of decades have certainly taken the human race to a place that was unimaginable before. Thanks to these advancements, every aspect of human life, from what we wear to how we work to how we relax, has undergone drastic progress. After this, I'll write about the internet. The most significant change has been in how we obtain information. While always in the past, information was difficult to access and restricted to a select few, nowadays it is accessible to most of the Earth's population through the internet and smartphones. Notice the fact that the tone I'm using in my writing is all about comparing the present time to the past, how things are better today than the past. Because what I'm trying to convey is that now is the best time ever. Also, the sentence structures that I'm using are varied. Instead of just saying, moreover, we also have internet which helps us get information, I'm writing the same point in a better way. I'll write the next point about communication now. Along with this, communication has evolved to what was not too far back considered to be science fiction. In today's times, video calls, real-time online meetings, sending emails in a matter of seconds, and working from home have become an everyday affair. Again, I've used phrases like in a matter of seconds, an everyday affair, to convey simple concepts such as something can be done very quickly or that something is very common these days. In the next sentence, I will mention entertainment and medicine together. Because I thought of a lot of points, I'm choosing not to write all of them because they are not needed. So, since I've said before that a lot of things have advanced, I'll just mention that the same can be said about many other fields as well. So I'm writing, the same can be said about the substantial improvement in the fields of entertainment, medicine, and more. And then in my last sentence, I'll say that I support the viewpoint that now is the best time ever. Therefore, I corroborate the view that the time we are living in is better than any time in the past. Make a note of the many collocations that I have used while writing. Technological advancements, significant change, everyday affair, and substantial improvement. Now in this essay, because I have chosen to agree with the given viewpoint, I'll just mention a little bit about some other period to convey that even that period would have been interesting. So I'll start my third paragraph with having said that, which is a phrase we can use when we are starting some opposing viewpoint. Having said that, I do feel that there are many instances from the past that make those olden times fascinating. Being a music lover, I can especially think of the decades of 60s, 70s, and 80s, which were, in my humble opinion, the golden decades of the music industry. What would I not give to see the rock band Queen perform live or to croon along with the Beatles? So as I had mentioned when planning the essay, we can write about anything that interests us, just vaguely mentioning that that is a time we would have wanted to live in. So I've mentioned the music scene of these 3 decades, mentioned these bands, and just conveyed that I would really have wanted to see them live. So that, according to me, was a great period, a golden period. And keeping in mind that I have said that the time we are living in now is the best time, I'll write my conclusion as, in conclusion, I strongly believe that today's day and age is superior to any time before in terms of technology and comforts. Yet, it cannot be denied that almost every time, every era in history had its own fascinating and intriguing inventions, discoveries, and adventures. So I've clearly said that the present time is the best and kind of mentioned a little that other times also have their own fascinating features. Let's now look at another way of writing our second, third, and fourth paragraphs. If I want to convey that although there are some positives of today's times, but the negatives are more and therefore it is not the best time, what I can do is that in the first couple of sentences I can convey the positives and then start writing the negatives, all in the second paragraph. So I'll start with the same sentence I had started with before. The technological advancements of the past couple of decades have certainly taken the human race to a place that was unimaginable before. Thanks to these advancements, we have access to information at the click of a button, video calls possible across continents in real time, and much more. So instead of listing out all the positives, I've just mentioned a couple of them in a single sentence. Now I'll start listing out the negatives. In the negatives, we had first thought about the environmental issues. So I'll start writing the negatives with despite to convey contrast, to convey that I'm now writing the opposite. Despite these positives, I do not believe that we are living in the best time ever. We are facing drastic environmental issues such as climate change. Next, I'll write about materialism and consumerism. What is worse, almost every individual seems to be caught up in the web of materialism and consumerism. As a result, relationships have taken a back seat. And then in my last sentence of the second paragraph, I'll say that yes, there are some positives, but it is far from the best time ever. So I'll write it as, therefore, the present times may seem to paint a rosy picture from a materialistic point of view, but according to me, the truth is far from it. Now we'll write the third paragraph. Now in this case, the tone is different. Because I've written that the present time is not the best ever, I'll try to present another time which according to me was not only interesting but was also better than the present time. I'll start with the phrase by contrast. By contrast, I feel the end of the 20th century was a much more pleasant, fascinating, and balanced time. So what I'm trying to convey is that go back a few decades and that time had balance. We had some technological advancements, but we also had simplicity of life. I'll give my first reason as my primary reason for believing so is that there was a balance between dependence on technology and people at that time. As a result, personal relationships were still given importance. Those, I believe, were simpler times, thereby making them better times than today. To add to this point, I'll write an example of how social media was not prevalent back then. An example of this is the fact that in the 90s, social media had yet not taken over the lives of people of almost every age group. There was less showing off and as a result, less insecurity. Also, people would compliment one another face to face rather than just click like on their phones. Therefore, all in all, people were better connected emotionally and socially back then, which is the reason why I believe that it was an intriguing time to have lived in. So I have made it a point to mention the words fascinating, intriguing, to convey that according to me this was an interesting time. And then in my conclusion, I would convey very clearly that present time is not the best, and then another time was also an interesting time. Here's my conclusion. In conclusion, although I concede that today's day and age has many benefits, it is certainly not superior to every other time before. I believe the 1990s were a fascinating time with enough access to technology to help ease our lives, and yet certain personal parts of life were untouched by the mechanical impact of technology. Hope these two essays help you understand how to plan and write essays quickly, how to use your personal experiences to come up with points for essay questions which you may at the first glance consider to be exceptionally difficult. You can read these essays and more on our website as well. Find the direct link for these essays in the description of this video.